The lock clicked behind him, a sound so quiet it should have meant nothing. But in that moment, with rain hammering against my dorm window and Jake standing there soaking wet, his chest heaving like he'd run a marathon, that tiny metallic sound felt like the loudest thing in the world. His green eyes met mine with an intensity I'd never seen before, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I can't do this anymore, Alex. I can't keep pretending." My heart stopped. We'd been roommates for 8 months. 8 months of carefully maintained boundaries, of me hiding who I was, of watching him bring girls back to our shared space while I buried myself in textbooks and pretended not to care. 8 months of convincing myself that the way he looked at me sometimes, lingering just a second too long, meant absolutely nothing. But now he was here, drenched from the storm outside, locking the door behind him like he was afraid someone might interrupt what he was about to say. Or maybe he was afraid he'd lose his nerve and run. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at the straight hockey player who'd become my closest friend, my impossible crush, and apparently, judging by the way his hands were trembling, something I'd never dared to imagine. "Jake," I managed to say, my voice cracking, "what are you talking about?" He took a step toward me, water dripping from his dark hair onto our already cluttered floor. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," he said, "and I think you've known for a lot longer than I have. Let me take you back to where this all began. Not to the moment Jake locked that door, but to 8 months earlier, when I first walked into room 347 of Harrison Hall with 2 suitcases, a mini fridge, and absolutely no idea that my life was about to become infinitely more complicated. I'd requested a single room. After 4 years of high school spent carefully hiding who I was, I'd wanted college to be different, a fresh start where I could finally be myself. But Northwestern had overbooked, and somehow I ended up with a roommate assignment, Jake Mitchell. I'd looked him up on social media, of course, everyone does that, and my heart had sunk immediately. He was exactly the type of guy who'd made high school hell. Broad shoulders, athletic build, confident smile in every photo. Pictures of him in hockey gear at parties with his arm around different girls, doing keg stands and looking like he'd stepped out of some teen movie about popular kids. I'd convinced myself it would be fine. I'd keep my head down, focus on my pre-med classes, and maybe request a room transfer after the first semester. Then I met him in person, and everything I'd assumed went out the window. "Hey, you must be Alex." He'd bounded over to me, actually bounded like an overeager golden retriever, and grabbed one of my suitcases before I could protest. "Here, let me help with that. I got here yesterday and already claimed the left side of the room, but if you want it, we can totally switch. I'm not picky." He was taller than I'd expected, maybe 6'2" to my 5'10", and his smile was genuine in a way that immediately disarmed me. Up close, I could see details his Instagram photos hadn't captured. A small scar through his left eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he grinned, the nervous energy in how he moved. "No, right side is fine," I said, trying not to stare. "Thanks for helping." "Of course, man, we're roommates now, we've gotta look out for each other, right?" He set my suitcase down and extended his hand. "Jake Mitchell, business major, hockey player, obsessed with terrible action movies, and according to my mom, chronically messy but well-meaning. What about you?" I shook his hand, caught off guard by the warmth of his grip. "Alex Chen, pre-med, kind of the opposite on the movie front. I'm more into artsy stuff, and I'm neat, so maybe we'll balance each other out." "A neat pre-med roommate? Dude, I totally won the roommate lottery." His enthusiasm seemed boundless, almost childlike. "This is going to be awesome. My buddy Eric is down the hall in 352, and his roommate seems cool too. We're already planning a whole floor game night situation. You play video games?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "I'm not very good." "That's perfect. I'm incredibly competitive but also very patient. I'll teach you everything I know." He paused, then laughed. "Which admittedly isn't that much, but still, you seem like good people, Alex. I have a feeling we're going to be great friends." And somehow, impossibly, we were. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Jake was messy, he hadn't been kidding about that. His side of the room looked like a tornado had hit a sporting goods store, with hockey equipment, textbooks, and clothes scattered across every surface. He stayed up late watching YouTube videos without headphones, laughed too loud during midnight gaming sessions, and had a habit of eating my snacks without asking. But he was also thoughtful in unexpected ways. When I mentioned I had an 8 a.m. chemistry lab, he started setting alarms to make sure I didn't oversleep. He'd leave little post-it notes on my desk before big exams. "You're going to crush this." Jay, when I came back to our room stressed and overwhelmed, he'd somehow know to give me space or to drag me out for a walk around campus. "You think too much," he told me one evening when he'd found me spiraling over a B+ on a biology midterm. "Sometimes you just need to turn your brain off for a bit." Come on, we're getting pizza. I really should study. Alex, he grabbed my jacket and tossed it at me. The pizza place closes in 30 minutes. You've been staring at your laptop for 4 hours, and if I have to watch you torture yourself over one test grade for one more second, I'm going to lose it. Let's go. I went, and he was right. The pizza helped, as did getting out of our cramped dorm room and walking through campus on a crisp October night. We ended up sitting by the lake, talking about everything except academics. Jake told me about growing up in Minnesota, about his 3 younger sisters, about how his dad had played semi-pro hockey and had always dreamed Jake would go further. Sometimes I feel like I'm living his dream instead of my own, Jake admitted, staring out at the dark water. Don't get me wrong, I love hockey, but I wonder what else I might love if I gave myself permission to try. It was the first time I'd seen vulnerability beneath his easy confidence, and it made me like him even more. Which was dangerous because I was already fighting feelings I had no business having. What would you try, I asked, if you could do anything? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, that's the problem. I've been on this one track for so long, I'm not sure who I am without it. He turned to me then, his expression earnest. What about you? Have you always wanted to be a doctor? Pretty much. My parents immigrated here before I was born, worked incredibly hard to build a life. They want stability and success for me. Medicine feels like the right path. I paused. The safe path. Safe isn't always the same as right, Jake said quietly. Then he bumped his shoulder against mine. But hey, you'll be an amazing doctor. You actually care about people. That's rarer than you'd think. Something warm bloomed in my chest at his words, and I had to look away before he could see what I was sure was written all over my face. This was exactly why I needed to keep my distance. Jake Mitchell was straight, charismatic, and completely off-limits. He was also quickly becoming one of my favorite people. Thanks, I managed. That means a lot. I mean it. He stood up and brushed off his jeans. Now come on, I'm pretty sure they're showing some terrible sci-fi movie in the student union at 9. Your artistic taste needs to experience true cinematic garbage. I laughed despite myself. That sounds awful. It's going to be amazing, he corrected. Trust me. And I did. That was the problem. By November, we'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Jake had morning practices, so he'd be up at 5, trying desperately to be quiet as he stumbled around our dark room gathering his gear. I'd usually already be awake, having learned to sleep through his alarm, and I'd remind him where he'd left his lucky socks or which assignment was due that day. Evenings were our time. After dinner, we'd hole up in the room, him working on business case studies while I tackled organic chemistry, both of us surrounded by snacks and energy drinks and the comfortable silence of 2 people who didn't need to fill every moment with conversation. Sometimes Eric and a few other guys from our floor would join us, turning our room into an impromptu study session or gaming tournament. But my favorite times were the late nights when it was just the 2 of us. Jake would finish his work and flop onto his bed, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. He'd tell me stories about hockey practice, about his coach who quoted Sun Tzu during drills, about the weird superstitions his teammates had. I'd tell him about my lab partner who always managed to break equipment, about my advisor who spoke in riddles, about the poetry slam I'd gone to the previous weekend. You went to a poetry thing? Jake asked, propping himself up on one elbow to look at me. Was it good? It was incredible, I said honestly. There was this one performer who did a piece about identity and belonging that just, I don't know, it hit me. You should take me next time, Jake said. I've never been to anything like that. I looked at him in surprise. Really, I didn't think that would be your scene. Why not? He seemed genuinely confused. You like it, so it's probably cool. Besides, I want to understand the stuff you're into. We're friends, right? Yeah, I said, my throat suddenly tight. We are. Then take me to the next one. I want to experience your world, not just drag you into mine all the time. He said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But to me, it felt like something precious and fragile, this straight guy who actually wanted to understand the parts of life I cared about, who didn't make fun of my interests or dismiss them as weird or too artsy. Okay, I agreed. There's one next Friday, but you have to promise not to fall asleep. I never fall asleep during important things, Jake protested. You literally fell asleep during our floor meeting last week. That's because Jeremy was explaining dorm policy in the most boring voice known to mankind. Poetry performed by people with actual passion. I'll be wide awake, promise. He kept his promise. The following Friday, we walked to the student center together, Jake wearing jeans and a sweater that made his eyes look impossibly green. The poetry slam was packed, the energy electric, and I kept stealing glances at Jake to gauge his reaction. He was completely absorbed, leaning forward in his seat, his attention fixed on each performer. When it was over and we walked back across campus in the cold November air, he was unusually quiet. "You okay?" I asked. "Too weird for you?" "No," he said quickly. "Not at all. I'm just thinking that one person, the one who did the piece about not fitting into the boxes people made for them, that really got to me." "Yeah," I tried to keep my voice casual. "Why's that?" He shoved his hands in his pockets, his breath misting in the cold. "I don't know. It just felt like they were saying something I've been feeling but couldn't put into words, like, sometimes I feel like I'm performing this version of myself that everyone expects. The hockey player, the business major, the guy who has it all figured out. But underneath that, I'm not sure who I actually am." My heart was pounding. I think everyone feels like that sometimes. "Maybe," he glanced at me. "You don't though, you seem really comfortable with who you are." If only he knew. I spent every day carefully monitoring what I said, how I acted, making sure no one could see the truth I kept hidden. "I'm good at pretending," I said, the honesty slipping out before I could stop it. Jake stopped walking and turned to face me. "Pretending what?" I should have deflected, should have laughed it off and changed the subject. But something about the way he was looking at me, the vulnerability in his question, made me brave or stupid or both. "Pretending that I fit into the boxes people expect too," I said quietly, "pretending that I'm just like everyone else." "Are you though?" His voice was soft. "Like everyone else?" This was it, the moment where I could lie and keep things safe and uncomplicated, or tell the truth and risk everything we'd built. My hands were trembling and I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or fear. "No," I finally said, "I'm not." Jake was quiet for a long moment and I couldn't read his expression in the darkness. Then he did something that surprised me. He smiled, small and genuine. "Good," he said. "I'm glad you're not like everyone else, Alex. That's what makes you interesting." "You're not weirded out?" The question came out before I could stop it. "Weirded out by what?" "By you being honest with me." He shook his head. "Come on, man, give me some credit. I'm not that much of a stereotypical jock." Relief flooded through me, though I noticed he hadn't asked for clarification about what exactly I meant. Maybe he already knew, maybe he'd known all along and was being kind by not making me spell it out. "Thanks," I said, "for being cool about everything." "Always," he said simply. Then he threw his arm around my shoulders, casual, friendly, the kind of thing he did with all his hockey buddies, and steered me toward the dining hall. "Now come on, I'm starving and I heard they have good pizza tonight. We can dissect all the poetry and you can explain to me why the one person kept repeating that line about doors." We fell back into easy conversation, and I tried to ignore the way my skin burned where his arm touched me, tried to remind myself that this was just friendship, that reading anything more into it would only lead to heartbreak. But as we sat in the dining hall, Jake asking genuine questions about the performance and listening intently to my answers, I felt something shift between us, something subtle but undeniable. Things were changing, I just didn't know yet how much. December brought finals and a different kind of stress. The campus transformed into a pressure cooker, everyone holed up in libraries and common rooms, surviving on coffee and determination. Jake had hockey playoffs on top of his exams, and I watched him run himself ragged trying to balance everything. "You need to sleep," I told him one night when I found him face down in his economics textbook at 3 in the morning. "Can't," he mumbled. "Exam at 9, game at 7. If I sleep now, I won't wake up." "Jake," I gently closed his textbook, "you're going to make yourself sick. You need at least a few hours." "Will you wake me up at 6? His eyes were bloodshot when he looked at me. "Promise you'll wake me up." "I promise." "Okay," he stumbled to his bed, not even bothering to change clothes. "You're a good friend, Alex, best roommate I could have asked for." He was asleep within seconds, his breathing evening out into a steady rhythm. I sat at my desk, pretending to study but mostly just watching him sleep, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the vulnerable curve of his mouth, the athletic grace of him even in rest. I let myself look, let myself feel, because he couldn't see and it didn't hurt anyone. At 6, I woke him as promised. He groaned and rolled over, squinting at me in the early morning light. "You actually woke me up. I told you I would." I know, but, he sat up slowly, running a hand through his messy hair. Most people don't keep promises like that, small ones, the ones that seem like they don't matter. They matter to me, I said, you matter to me. Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or something deeper I couldn't name. You matter to me too, he said quietly. You know that, right? I do now. He held my gaze for a long moment, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except exist in this strange, suspended space where everything felt possible and terrifying and electric. Then his phone alarm went off, shattering the moment, and he groaned again. Fuck, I have to shower and get to this exam. Go, I said, I'll make you a coffee. What did I do to deserve you? He grabbed his shower caddy and headed for the door, then paused and turned back. Seriously though, thank you for everything. Anytime. After he left, I sat in the quiet room and tried to steady my racing heart. This was getting dangerous. I was in too deep, feeling too much, hopping for things I had no right to hope for. Jake was straight. He had a girlfriend, well, several girlfriends over the past few months, none of them lasting more than a few weeks, but still. He was conventionally masculine, a hockey player, the kind of guy who would probably be horrified if he knew his roommate was developing serious feelings for him. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me just now, the weight behind his words when he said I mattered to him. The way he'd been so accepting when I'd hinted at my identity, never pushing for details but also never treating me differently. I was probably imagining things, seeing what I wanted to see. It was dangerous and foolish, and I needed to get it under control before I ruined the best friendship I'd ever had. I made him a coffee anyway. The night before we all left for winter break, our floor threw a party. Someone had smuggled in alcohol, someone else had rigged up speakers in the common room, and suddenly our dorm transformed into a chaotic celebration of survived finals and temporary freedom. I hadn't planned on going. Parties weren't really my scene, and I'd already said emotional goodbyes to the few friends I'd made, but Jake had other ideas. Come on, he said, pulling me off my bed where I'd been reading. It's our last night before break, you can't just sit here. I'm perfectly happy sitting here. I'm not happy with you sitting here, please, just for an hour. He gave me his most ridiculous puppy dog look, and despite myself, I laughed. Fine, 1 hour. Yes, he pumped his fist like I'd just agreed to something monumental. You need to see Eric try to dance, it's life-changing. The party was loud and crowded and overwhelming in the way these things always were. I stayed close to Jake, who seemed determined to keep me engaged, introducing me to people, including me in conversations, making sure I wasn't standing awkwardly in a corner. It was sweet how protective he was being, even if he didn't realize he was doing it. Around 11, some girl from Jake's business class, Ashley or Amber, I couldn't remember, cornered him by the makeshift bar. She was drunk and handsy, pressing herself against him while giggling at everything he said. I watched from across the room, feeling that familiar twist of jealousy and resignation. This was Jake's world, these were his people. I was the outlier, the roommate he was kind to but who didn't really belong in this space. I slipped out of the common room and headed back to our dorm, ready to spend the rest of the night packing and pretending I didn't care. But I'd barely been back for 5 minutes when the door burst open and Jake stumbled in, looking flushed and annoyed. There you are, I turned around and you were gone. You seemed busy, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I didn't want to interrupt. Busy? He looked genuinely confused, then understanding dawned. Oh, Ashley, she's a lot. I wasn't interested. You don't have to explain yourself to me. I know I don't have to, I want to. He crossed the room and sat on my bed, looking up at me with an intensity that made my mouth go dry. I wanted to be at that party with you, not getting hit on by drunk classmates. Jake. I'm serious. This whole semester the best parts have been the time we spend together, just us in this room, talking or not talking or whatever. That's what I'll miss over break, not the parties or the hockey or any of that, you. My heart was doing dangerous things in my chest. I'll miss you too. Will you though? He stood up and suddenly we were very close, his height advantage even more pronounced. Sometimes I feel like you're holding back with me, like there's this wall between us that I can't figure out how to get past. I'm not, I started to protest, but he cut me off. You are, and I get it. I think you don't trust easily. You've probably had reasons not to, but I want you to know that you can trust me with anything. I'm not going anywhere. How can you promise that? The question came out raw. People always say that and then they find out who you really are and they leave. Then they're idiots? His voice was fierce. Whatever you think might scare me off, whatever you're holding back, it won't. I don't care if you're gay, Alex, if that's what you're worried about. The world stopped. He'd said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like he'd known all along and was just waiting for me to confirm it. How did you? I'm not an idiot, he said gently. And you're not as good at hiding as you think you are, at least not from people who actually pay attention to you. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the fact that he'd known and hadn't said anything, had just continued being my friend like it didn't matter at all. Are you okay? Jake asked, concern creeping into his voice. I didn't mean to just spring that on you, I thought you knew that I knew, fuck, I'm sorry if I... No, I managed. No, I'm just surprised and relieved. I think I've been so careful. You shouldn't have to be careful, not with me. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. You're my best friend, Alex. This doesn't change anything between us. Except it changed everything, because now he knew and I couldn't hide behind plausible deniability anymore. Now every time I looked at him, every time my heart did that stupid flutter thing, he might notice, might see what I'd been trying so hard to conceal. Thank you, I said quietly, for being cool about it. Of course. He pulled me into a hug, unexpected and brief but solid and warm. When he pulled back, he was smiling. Now come on, we're going back to that party. You're going to teach me how to dance to whatever artsy music you like and I'm going to embarrass both of us. Jake, I don't dance. Neither do I, it'll be a disaster, let's go. And somehow, despite everything, I found myself laughing as he dragged me back to the party. We didn't really dance, mostly we just swayed awkwardly while Jake made ridiculous faces and I tried not to die of secondhand embarrassment. But his hand was warm in mine, and he was looking at me like I was the only person in the crowded room, and for a few hours I let myself pretend that this meant something more than friendship. When I went home for break the next day, I carried that moment with me like a talisman. He knew, and he'd stayed. That had to count for something. I had no idea how much it would come to count for. Winter break was strange. Being back in my childhood home in my old room with its outdated posters and high school trophies felt like stepping backward in time. My parents were thrilled to have me back, peppering me with questions about classes and grades and future plans. They didn't ask about friends or social life, those things had never been priorities to them. Success was what mattered, achievement, living up to the sacrifices they'd made. I loved them, but I felt suffocated by their expectations. I texted Jake more than I should have. Random thoughts, funny observations, photos of my mom's increasingly elaborate holiday meals. He responded immediately every time, keeping up a constant stream of conversation that made the distance feel smaller. My sisters are driving me insane, he texted one evening. They keep asking me if I have a girlfriend and why not, and don't I want to settle down someday. I'm 19, can I live? Tell them you're married to hockey, I suggested. I tried that, they said hockey is a mistress, not a wife. My family is dramatic. Sounds entertaining though. It is, they'd like you, my mom especially. She has a thing for polite, smart boys, you'd charm her instantly. Something warm bloomed in my chest at the thought of meeting Jake's family, of being someone he'd want to introduce to them. Does she know you have a gay roommate? I typed, then deleted it. Too direct, too revealing of how much I thought about what his family might think of me. When are you coming back? I sent instead. Jan 3rd, you. Same early afternoon. Wanna coordinate flights? We could share an Uber from the airport. We did coordinate, and when I saw Jake waiting by baggage claim on January 3rd, something in my chest unclenched. He looked different somehow, more rested, his hair a little longer, wearing a thick sweater that his mom had clearly bought him for Christmas. When he spotted me, his entire face lit up. There you are, how was your flight? Fine, boring, yours. Same, I watched 2 terrible movies and ate questionable airplane food. It was everything I dreamed it would be. He grabbed one of my bags without being asked. Ready to head back to our shoebox of a room? More than ready. In the Uber back to campus, Jake told me about his break, the family gatherings, the ice skating with his sisters, the way his dad had cornered him about hockey recruitment and future plans. I told him about my parents' dinner parties, about my cousin's wedding where everyone asked what I was studying and nodded approvingly at pre-med, about the strange disconnect between who I was at school and who I had to be at home. That sounds exhausting, Jake said quietly. having to be different versions of yourself. It is, but it's easier now that I have somewhere to be myself, someone to be myself with. He looked at me then, something unreadable in his expression. I'm glad I can be that for you. When we got back to our dorm room, it felt like coming home in a way my parents' house hadn't. Our posters were still on the walls, our stuff exactly where we'd left it, the space imbued with 4 months of shared memories. Jake immediately flopped onto his bed with a dramatic sigh. I miss this place. You missed our tiny room with the weird heating and the bathroom down the hall. I missed our tiny room, he corrected. The place itself is whatever, but this space with you in it, yeah, I missed that. I busied myself unpacking so he wouldn't see the emotion on my face. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 19, not 90, but yeah, maybe I am. Is that allowed? It's allowed. Good, because I have something I need to tell you. His voice had gone serious, and when I turned around, he was sitting up, looking nervous. I did a lot of thinking over break. My heart started pounding. About what? About a lot of things, my major, my future, hockey, who I am versus who people expect me to be. He paused. About us. Us, I barely breathed the word. Our friendship, he clarified quickly, and I tried not to feel disappointed. It made me realize that I've never had someone in my life like you, someone who actually sees me, not just the version I perform, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, Jake. Promise. His eyes were intense. Because I'm realizing that you're kind of the most important person in my life right now, and that's terrifying and amazing, and I don't really know what to do with it. I crossed the room and sat next to him on his bed. I promise you're stuck with me whether you like it or not. I definitely like it. He bumped his shoulder against mine, even when you're being annoyingly neat and judging my side of the room. I don't judge your side of the room. You judge it constantly. I can feel your disappointed stare every time I leave clothes on the floor. Then maybe stop leaving clothes on the floor. Never, he grinned, it's part of my charm. We fell into our old rhythm like we'd never left, but something had shifted. Jake was touchier now, casual hand on my shoulder, arm around me when we walked across campus, sprawling across my bed to talk instead of staying on his own. It felt natural but also dangerous, blurring lines I'd tried so hard to maintain. Is this okay? He asked one night when I'd stiffened slightly as he draped himself across my legs while I studied. Me being in your space like this. Yeah, I said, because it was true even if it was also torture. It's fine. Good, because you're comfortable and I'm too lazy to move. He settled in more firmly. Tell me about your chemistry homework. I like when you explain science stuff. Your voice gets all passionate. You don't actually care about molecular structures. I care about things you care about. Now tell me about the molecules. So I did, and he listened, really listened, asking questions and making connections, his hand absently tracing patterns on my shin through my jeans. It was intimate in a way that made my chest ache, and I had to keep reminding myself that this was just how Jake was. Tactile, friendly, comfortable with physical affection in a way I'd never been with anyone. It didn't mean anything, it couldn't mean anything. But God, I wanted it to. Spring semester brought new classes, new routines, and a subtle shift in campus energy. January's cold gave way to February's slush, and everywhere you looked, people were coupling up, breaking up, falling in love with all the messy urgency of 19-year-olds figuring out who they were. Jake broke up with whatever girl he'd been casually seeing over the holidays. He didn't offer details, just mentioned it in passing one night. Why'd you end it? I asked, trying to sound casual. It wasn't fair to her, she wanted something serious and he trailed off. I didn't feel anything, and I kept thinking that shouldn't I feel something? If I'm going to be with someone, shouldn't it be intense and consuming and kind of scary? Shouldn't I not be able to imagine my life without them? That's pretty romantic for a hockey player. Hey, I contain multitudes. He threw a pillow at me. But seriously, I don't want to be with someone just because it's expected or easy. I want it to mean something. You'll find that, I said, ignoring the jealous twist in my gut at the thought of Jake with someone who made him feel that way. Maybe, he looked at me strangely. What about you, anyone you're interested in? The loaded question hung between us. I could deflect, change the subject, keep things safe, Or I could be honest in the vague way I'd learned to be honest without revealing too much. There's someone, I admitted, but it's complicated, he doesn't see me that way. He's an idiot then. I laughed despite myself, you don't even know who it is. Doesn't matter, anyone who doesn't see how incredible you are is objectively an idiot. Jake's voice was fierce. You're smart and kind and funny when you let yourself be, you listen when people talk, you notice things, you care about stuff that actually matters, any guy would be lucky to be with you. Jake. I mean it, whoever this guy is, if he can't see what's right in front of him, then fuck him. You deserve someone who knows exactly how lucky they are. The intensity in his voice made my heart race. He was staring at me with those green eyes and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except feel the weight of words I wanted desperately to say but couldn't. Thanks, I managed, that means a lot. Yeah, well, he looked away, suddenly awkward. You're my best friend, I'm supposed to hype you up. The moment passed, but it left me shaken. The way Jake talked about what I deserved, the passion in his defense of me, the possessive edge to his words, it all felt like more than friendship. But Jake was straight. He dated girls exclusively. I was reading too much into things, seeing what I wanted to see. I needed to get this under control before I did something stupid. In March, Jake injured his shoulder during a game. It wasn't serious, just a bad collision that left him bruised and sore, but the team doctor ordered him to rest for 2 weeks. No practice, no games, just recovery. Jake did not handle it well. He was restless and irritable, packing our small room like a caged animal, complaining about how slowly his shoulder was healing, how he was letting his team down, how he'd probably lose his starting position to backup. I listened and sympathized and tried to distract him with movies and games and study sessions. You need to relax, I told him when I found him attempting one-armed push-ups at midnight. You're going to make it worse. I can't just do nothing. You're not doing nothing, you're healing, that's important. It's frustrating, he sat down heavily on his bed. Hockey is the one thing I'm actually good at, without it I don't know what I am. I sat next to him, you're Jake, you're a good student, a loyal friend, someone who makes people laugh. Hockey is something you do, not who you are. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just usually don't listen. He smiled despite himself, what would I do without you? Probably injure yourself worse by refusing to rest. Probably, he leaned his head on my shoulder and I froze, hyper-aware of every point of contact between us. Thanks for putting up with me, I know I'm being a nightmare right now. You're not a nightmare, you're just hurt and frustrated, it's okay to feel that. You always make things okay, he said quietly, even when they're not. We sat like that for a while, his weight warm against my side, the room quiet except for the radiator's hiss. It felt peaceful in a way that made my chest ache. This was all I'd ever get, these friendly moments of closeness that Jake probably didn't think twice about but that I would remember forever. Alex, his voice was soft. Yes. Can I ask you something? Of course. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd changed his mind. Then, the guy you mentioned, the one you like, is it someone I know? My heart stopped, why do you ask? Just curious, you never talk about him. There's not much to talk about, it's not going anywhere. But you still feel it, even knowing nothing will happen. Yeah, I admitted, I do, it's stupid but I can't seem to help it. It's not stupid. He lifted his head from my shoulder and I immediately missed the contact. Feelings aren't stupid, they just are. Profound thoughts from Jake Mitchell at midnight. I'm full of surprises, he smiled but it didn't reach his eyes. I hope he figures it out someday that he's missing something amazing. Jake. I should sleep, shoulders aching. He stood up, suddenly restless again. Thanks for the talk. Anytime. I watched him get into bed and turn off his lamp, watched his breathing slowly even out, and I wondered what that conversation had really been about. There'd been something underneath his questions. Something I couldn't quite name, but it was probably just wishful thinking on my part, my brain trying to find meaning in innocent curiosity. I needed to stop doing this to myself. April brought warmer weather and the Poetry Slam's spring showcase. I'd been going regularly all semester and Jake had come with me to a few of them, always engaged and thoughtful, asking questions on the walk home about technique and meaning, and how the performers found the courage to be so vulnerable in front of strangers. "You should perform," he told me one evening as we walked back from a particularly good show. "Absolutely not." "Why not? You're always writing in that notebook. I bet you have something amazing in there." "Those are just random thoughts, nothing coherent." "Can I read them?" "No," I clutched the notebook protectively, "they're private." "Come on, just one page, I promise I won't judge." That's exactly what someone who's about to judge would say. He laughed. "Fine, keep your secrets, but I still think you should perform. You have something to say, I can tell." "How can you possibly tell that?" "Because I pay attention to you," he said it simply, like it was obvious. "I see the way you react to certain pieces, the ones about identity, about hiding, about the distance between who you are and who people see. Those ones make you still and focused in a different way, like they're saying things you wish you could say." He was right, which was terrifying. I'd thought I was being subtle, but apparently not subtle enough for someone who actually watched me. "Maybe someday," I said, which was as close to agreement as I could manage. "I'll hold you to that." 2 weeks later, I found myself signed up for the spring showcase. I'm still not entirely sure how it happened, some combination of Jake's encouragement, 3 drinks worth of liquid courage, and a late-night moment of thinking, why the hell not? I didn't tell Jake I'd signed up. I figured I'd chicken out before the actual event anyway. But then the showcase arrived, and my name was on the list, and Jake was looking at me with excitement and pride as we walked into the venue. "This is going to be so good," he said. "I can't wait to see who performs tonight." I should have told him, should have mentioned casually that I'd be one of the performers. But my anxiety had turned me mute, and before I knew it, the show was starting and my time slot was approaching, and I still hadn't said a word. When my name was called, Jake's head whipped toward me so fast I heard his neck crack. "You're performing." Apparently, I managed, standing on shaky legs. "Alex, that's amazing. I knew you had it in you." His grin was enormous, proud and excited in equal measure. "Go, get up there, I'll be cheering for you." I made my way to the small stage on autopilot, my heart hammering so hard I could barely hear the applause. The lights were bright, making it hard to see the audience, which was probably a good thing. I pulled out the crumpled paper where I'd written my piece, a poem about doors and masks and the exhausting performance of pretending to be someone you're not. I started reading, and somehow my voice stayed steady even though my hands were shaking. The words poured out all the frustration and longing and fear I'd been carrying, transformed into metaphor and imagery. I didn't look at Jake, couldn't look at Jake. If I saw his reaction, I'd fall apart. But I could feel him listening, could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing. When I finished, the applause felt distant and unreal. I stumbled back to my seat, and Jake immediately grabbed my hand and squeezed. "That was incredible," he whispered fiercely. "Alex, I had no idea you could. That was beautiful and brave, and I'm so fucking proud of you right now." His hand was still in mine, and I couldn't make myself let go. "Thanks," I whispered back. I was terrified. "Couldn't tell at all. You were amazing." We sat through the rest of the performances with our hands linked between us, and I tried not to read too much into it, tried not to hope. But Jake's thumb was tracing absent patterns on my palm, and his shoulder was pressed against mine, and when I'd performed a poem that was basically about him, even if he didn't know it, he'd looked at me like I'd hung the moon. Maybe I was allowed to hope just a little. Finals came again, and with them, the looming end of our first year. Jake's shoulder had healed, and he'd finished the season strong, with multiple scouts expressing interest in his future. He'd aced his business classes despite procrastinating on every assignment. I'd maintained my 4 and secured a summer research position at a lab back home. Everything was working out exactly as planned. So why did it feel like something was ending? "We're rooming together again next year, right?" Jake asked one night in late April. "I already put in the request for us to get one of the doubles in the new dorm." "Yeah, of course." The relief was immediate and overwhelming. I'd been afraid to bring it up, worried he might want to change. "Good, because I can't imagine living with anyone else. You've kind of ruined me for other roommates." "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Definitely a compliment. You've set the bar impossibly high. How am I supposed to go back to someone who doesn't make me coffee when I'm stressed or know exactly when I need to talk versus when I need space?" You could just communicate your needs like a normal person. Where's the fun in that? He grinned. Besides, I like that you just know makes me feel understood. You are understood maybe too well. Something shifted in his expression. Is that possible, being understood too well? I don't know, maybe not. I closed my textbook. Why do you ask? I've been thinking about what you said, about that guy you like, the one who doesn't see you the right way. He was picking at a loose thread on his comforter, not meeting my eyes. And I keep wondering what he sees instead, because if he really understands you, really pays attention, I don't know how he couldn't see how incredible you are.
Jake.
Let me finish? He finally looked up and his eyes were intense. You did that poem last month, the one about doors and masks. I can't stop thinking about it, about what you said about performing a version of yourself, about the distance between who you are and who people see. It resonated with you because you feel the same way, you said so. Yeah, but I wonder if we feel it for the same reasons. He took a deep breath. I think I've been performing too, playing the part of someone I thought I was supposed to be, and being around you, being your friend, it's made me question all of it. My heart was racing. Question what? Everything, who I am, who I want to be, what I actually want versus what I thought I wanted. He stood up and started packing. I've dated girls because that's what I was supposed to do. I play hockey because it's what my dad wants. I'm majoring in business because it seemed practical, but none of it feels real the way you feel real. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying I think I've been lying to myself. He stopped packing and turned to face me. And the really scary part is I think I know what the truth is. I've known for a while now, I just didn't want to admit it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stare at him and wait for him to say words that would either shatter me or change everything. Alex, he ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. Fuck, this is harder than I thought. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say. But I want to, I need to, because keeping it in is driving me crazy and you deserve to know, and I'm so tired of pretending. He crossed the room and sat next to me on my bed, close enough that our knees touched. Remember when you told me about that guy, the one you liked who didn't see you the right way?
Yes.
Is it me? His voice was barely a whisper. Am I the guy? The world stopped spinning. I couldn't lie, couldn't deflect, couldn't do anything except nod. Yeah, I managed. It's you. How long? Pretty much since we met. I tried to stop, tried to get over it, but... Don't, he grabbed my hand. Don't try to get over it, please don't. Jake, what are you saying? I'm saying I've been an idiot. I've been lying to myself for months because I didn't understand what I was feeling. I thought it was just friendship, just really caring about someone. But then you performed that poem and something clicked into place and I realized I don't feel this way about my other friends. I don't think about them constantly. I don't want to be near them all the time. I don't feel like my world is better when they're in it. He squeezed my hand. I only feel that way about you.
Yeah.
Are you telling me you have feelings for me? I needed to hear him say it clearly, needed to know I wasn't misunderstanding. I'm telling you that I think I'm falling in love with you. His voice was shaking but certain. And I know that's terrifying and confusing and probably way too much to dump on you before finals, but I can't keep it in anymore. You asked me once if I was weirded out that you're gay, and the truth is I wasn't weirded out at all. I was relieved, because it meant maybe, possibly, there was a chance you might feel the same way I do. Tears were burning behind my eyes. This couldn't be real. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life, not to people like me. Say something, Jake pleaded. Please, I'm kind of dying here. I don't know what to say. I never let myself imagine this could happen. Is it a good thing that it's happening? It's everything I wanted and everything that terrifies me. I looked at our joined hands. You're straight, Jake, or you were, you dated girls. I know, and I'm still trying to figure out what that means about who I am, but I know what I feel, and I know that it's real and it's intense and it's specifically about you. Maybe I'm not straight, maybe I'm bi or pan or something else entirely. I don't have all the answers, but I know I want to figure it out with you if you'll let me. What if you decide this was a mistake? What if you wake up one day and realize you're not actually into guys and I'm just the exception and... He cut me off by cupping my face in his hands. Alex, look at me, I did, drowning in green eyes that held nothing but sincerity. I'm not going to wake up and decide loving you is a mistake. The only mistake I've made is taking this long to figure it out. You said love. I did, because it's true. I love you, I'm in love with you, and I know that's scary and we have a lot to figure out, but I need you to know how I feel. I'm done pretending. I'm done performing, I just want to be honest about what I want, and what I want is you." A tear escaped and ran down my cheek. Jake caught it with his thumb, so gentle it made my heart ache. "I love you too," I whispered. "I've loved you for so long I can't remember when it started." His smile was radiant. "Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I kiss you?" His voice was soft, uncertain in a way Jake rarely was. "I've been thinking about it for weeks and I really, really want to kiss you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Jake leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, and then his lips were on mine and the entire world disappeared. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, both of us learning the shape of this new thing between us. Then Jake's hand slid into my hair and the kiss deepened, became more sure, more urgent. I grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him closer, years of wanting finally finding an outlet. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jake rested his forehead against mine. He trailed off.
Yeah.
"Can we do it again?" I laughed, dizzy with happiness. "Definitely." We kissed until we were sprawled across my narrow bed, tangled together in a way that would make studying impossible. But I didn't care. Let the finals wait. Let the world wait. Right now there was just this: Jake's weight against me, his hands in my hair, his smile against my lips. "We should probably talk about this," I said eventually, when we'd settled into just holding each other. "Figure out what it means." "It means I'm your boyfriend now," Jake said decisively, "if you want me to be."
Yes, obviously yes.
"Good, then that's settled." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "We can figure out the rest as we go, but I'm not hiding this, Alex. I don't want to hide us." Fear spiked through my contentment. "Your team, your friends, will accept it or they won't. I'm done living for other people's expectations." His voice was firm. "I'm not saying we need to make some big announcement, but I'm not going to pretend you're just my roommate when you're so much more than that, okay?" "Okay," I agreed, because how could I argue when he was looking at me like I was something precious? We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other in my tiny bed, and when I woke up to my alarm the next morning, Jake was still there, his hair messy and his eyes soft with sleep. "Morning," he murmured, pulling me closer.
We have finals.
"Don't care, want to stay here with you."
Jake.
"Fine, fine, responsibility calls." He pressed a quick kiss to my lips and reluctantly untangled himself. "But tonight, after our exams, we're doing this again."
Deal.
We told Eric first, mostly because he cornered us in the hallway and asked why we both looked weird and happy. "We're dating," Jake said simply, his arm around my waist. Eric blinked. "You and Alex?"
Yep.
"Since when?"
Since last night, officially.
"Huh?" Eric processed this for a moment. "Okay, cool. Does this mean you'll stop mopping around and being weird finally?" "I wasn't mopping." "Dude, you've been mopping for months. It was painful to watch." Eric grinned at me. "Glad you finally put him out of his misery."
Thanks, I think.
"This is good, you guys make sense." Eric clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Just don't make the rest of us feel like third wheels all the time, okay?"
No promises, Jake said cheerfully.
Word spread quickly after that. Some people were surprised, others claimed they'd totally seen it coming, a few were awkward about it, but most people were just fine with it, supportive even. Jake's hockey team took it in stride, his coach pulling him aside only to make sure he was staying focused for next season. The world didn't end, the sky didn't fall, we were just us but better. Finals ended, summer approached, and suddenly we were packing up our dorm room for the break. Saying goodbye was harder than I'd expected. "It's just 3 months," Jake reminded me as we stood in the empty room, our bags packed and waiting. "We'll text constantly, video chat, maybe I can even visit. I'll tell my parents I want to see colleges in California. They'll know that's a lie, you're already committed here. Then I'll tell them the truth, that I want to see my boyfriend." He pulled me close. "Because I'm not hiding us, remember? Your parents might not be okay with this. Then they'll have to get okay with it because you're not going anywhere." He kissed me softly. "I love you, Alex Chen. I'll see you in 3 months." "I love you too." We kissed goodbye in that empty dorm room, and then I watched him walk away toward his ride home. And I tried to believe that this was real, that it would last, that I hadn't just imagined the entire perfect impossible thing. Summer was long and strange. I worked at the research lab, lived with my parents, and counted down the days until I could go back to school. Jake and I texted constantly, good morning messages, random thoughts, photos of our days. We video chatted most nights, talking until one of us fell asleep on camera. His parents took the news better than he'd expected. His mom cried, but happy tears, telling him she just wanted him to be happy. His dad was quiet at first, then asked Jake a lot of questions about whether he was sure whether he'd thought this through. But eventually he came around, especially after Jake told him about me, about my grades, my goals, how we'd met. He wants to meet you, Jake told me during one of our calls. When you're ready, no pressure. I want to meet them too, eventually. My parents were a different story. I didn't tell them, didn't know how to tell them without dismantling the carefully constructed version of myself I'd presented my entire life. Jake understood, didn't push, just promised that whenever I was ready, he'd be there. In late July, Jake surprised me by actually convincing his parents to let him visit. He showed up at my doorstep with a duffel bag and that brilliant smile, and I didn't care that my parents were home or that my neighbors might see. I pulled him inside and kissed him like I'd been drowning and he was air. Missed you, he murmured against my lips. Missed you more. He stayed for a week. We told my parents he was my roommate visiting to look at potential med schools in the area, which they bought completely. We were careful around them, no touching, no lingering looks, just two friends hanging out. But at night, when Jake snuck into my room after my parents were asleep, we made up for lost time. I hate that you have to hide this from them, Jake whispered one night as we lay tangled together in my narrow childhood bed. Me too, but I'm not ready yet. They have all these expectations. I know, I understand. Whenever you're ready, I'll be there, but I wish you didn't have to carry this alone. I'm not alone, I have you. He kissed my forehead, always. When he left to go back to Minnesota, the goodbye was just as hard as the first one. But we had only one more month until school started, until we'd be back in our shared room, until we could just be us without having to hide or explain or worry. I counted down the days. Sophomore year started with us moving into a nicer dorm, an actual double with our own bathroom and more space. We decorated it together, mixing Jake's hockey posters with my art prints, his dumbbells with my books, creating a space that was wholly ours. This is good, Jake said, surveying the room with satisfaction. This is home. It really is. Classes started, hockey season ramped up, and we fell into a new rhythm. We were more open now, not flaunting our relationship but not hiding it either. Jake would grab my hand walking across campus. I'd kiss him goodbye before classes. We were just a couple, no different from any of the straight couples around us. Well, mostly no different. We still got the occasional stare, the sometimes comment. But Jake handled it with grace and firm boundaries, making it clear that his relationship wasn't up for debate or discussion. And most people, seeing how serious we were, backed off. In October, Jake took me to his hockey game wearing his jersey. I sat in the stands with his number on my back, and when he scored a goal, he looked right at me and smiled. After the game, still in his gear and sweaty and gross, he kissed me in front of his entire team. Dude, get a room, someone called out, laughing. We have a room, Jake shot back, but thanks for your concern. We were happy, stupidly, impossibly happy in the way you can only be when you're young and in love and finally not hiding who you are. But life isn't a fairy tale, and happy doesn't mean easy. In November, Jake's dad came to watch a game. Afterward, he took us out to dinner, me, Jake, and Eric. It was going well until his dad casually mentioned a girl from back home, someone who'd asked about Jake. I told her you were seeing someone, his dad said. Didn't mention it was serious though, figured you two were just figuring things out. Jake's jaw tightened. It is serious, Dad, I'm in love with Alex, this isn't some phase or experiment. I didn't say it was, I just meant you're young, you don't need to label everything or rush into. I'm not rushing, I'm not confused, I know what I want and I want him. Jake grabbed my hand on top of the table. I need you to understand that. The silence was heavy. Eric suddenly became very interested in his phone. Jake's dad looked between us, something unreadable in his expression. Okay, he finally said. Okay, I hear you, I'm trying to understand, Jake, it's just different from what I expected for you. I know, but this is my life and he's a part of it, a huge part, the most important part. His dad nodded slowly. Then I need to accept that, and I will. It might take time, but I will. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. After dinner, Jake was quiet, processing the conversation. When we got back to our dorm, he pulled me into his arms and just held me. Thank you for being patient with them, with all of this. Of course, they're your family, they love you, they'll come around. They will, they have to, because I'm not giving you up for anyone or anything. He pulled back to look at me. You know that, right? No matter what anyone says or thinks, I'm all in on us. I know, me too. December brought my own reckoning. I went home for winter break, and for the first time I brought Jake with me, not as my roommate, as my boyfriend. I'd finally told my parents over Thanksgiving, a rushed, tearful phone call where I word vomited everything I'd been holding in for years. My mom had cried. My dad had gone silent. They'd asked for time to process, and I'd given it to them. Now, a month later, they'd agreed to meet Jake. He was nervous in a way I'd never seen him before, constantly adjusting his shirt and asking if he looked okay. You look great, I assured him for the 10th time. They're going to love you. What if they don't? What if they blame me for? They won't, and even if they do, we'll handle it together. The dinner was awkward at first. My parents were polite but distant, clearly struggling with this new reality. But Jake was himself, charming, respectful, genuinely interested in their lives and work. He asked my dad about his engineering job, complimented my mom's cooking, talked about his own family and his goals and how we'd met. Alex talks about you both all the time, Jake said. He's so proud of everything you've accomplished, everything you've built. And I want you to know that I understand how much he means to you because he means that much to me too. My mom's expression softened slightly. How did you two? When did you know? Jake glanced at me, and I nodded permission for him to tell the truth. I've known I had feelings for Alex since last spring, Jake said, but it took me a while to understand what those feelings meant. I'd never thought about being with a guy before, but with Alex it didn't feel like a choice or a decision. It just felt right. He felt right. He reached for my hand under the table. I know this might not be what you imagined for him, but I promise I'll spend every day trying to deserve him, trying to make him as happy as he makes me. The silence stretched and I held my breath. Then my dad cleared his throat. You make our son happy, he said slowly. We can see that, and you seem like a good young man. It's just, this is new for us. We need time to adjust our expectations. I understand, Jake said. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. My parents didn't immediately embrace us or become allies overnight. But it was a beginning. A tentative, fragile beginning where they could see Jake as a person, not just as a disruption to their plans for me. After dinner, as Jake and I walked to his car, he pulled me into a tight hug. That was terrifying. You were perfect, I said. Thank you for being here, for doing this with me. Always, that's what this is, right? Doing the hard stuff together. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. The rest of sophomore year passed in a blur of classes and games and moments of ordinary happiness that felt extraordinary because we were living them together. We had our first real fight about Jake's tendency to leave wet towels everywhere. We celebrated our first anniversary dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first real date. We navigated the complexities of being out and together and figuring out what that meant. But through it all, one truth remained constant. We loved each other, fiercely, completely, in a way that felt both terrifying and essential. Junior year brought new challenges, harder classes, more pressure, the looming specter of future plans and life after college. But it also brought more confidence in who we were, together and individually. Jake changed his major to education, realizing he wanted to coach hockey and work with kids. I started volunteering at a youth LGBTQ+ center, finding purpose in helping others navigate what I'd struggled with. We grew up basically together. Which brings me to now, to senior year, to this moment where I'm sitting in our apartment. We moved off campus with Eric and another friend, watching Jake sleep and thinking about how far we've come. Tomorrow, Jake has a job interview for a coaching position at a local high school. Next month, I find out if I got into my top medical school choices. We're standing at the precipice of the rest of our lives, and it's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But here's what I know. That night sophomore year when Jake locked the door and told me he couldn't keep pretending, when he chose honesty and vulnerability over safety and certainty, changed everything. Not just for us, but for who I am as a person. He taught me that being seen, really, truly seen, is worth the risk of heartbreak. That love isn't about fitting into expected narratives or following predetermined paths. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when your voice shakes and your hands tremble and you have no idea how the other person will respond. Jake stirs in his sleep, reaching for me instinctively. I take his hand and hold on, thinking about all the moments that led us here, the awkward beginning, the friendship that became something more, the fear and courage and stumbling steps toward honesty. "Love you," he murmurs half asleep. "Love you too," I whisper back. And I think about that locked door and how sometimes the scariest moments, the ones where you think everything might fall apart, are actually the moments where everything finally comes together. Jake was right, he couldn't keep pretending. Neither could I. And thank God for that, because this, messy and complicated and real and ours, is so much better than any version of ourselves we ever pretended to be. Epilogue. 5 years later, I'm standing in Jake's classroom, our classroom now since I volunteer here teaching science to his hockey students, watching him demonstrate proper shooting technique to a group of energetic 13-year-olds. He's in his element, patient and enthusiastic, and so clearly born for this. My phone buzzes, a text from my mom: "We're so proud of you, both of you. See you at graduation next week." I smile, thinking about how far we've all come. My parents aren't just accepting anymore, they're genuinely supportive, treating Jake like a son, showing up to his games and asking about his students. His parents send me care packages during exam season and invite my family to holidays. It's not perfect, we still face ignorance sometimes, still have to navigate a world that isn't always kind to people like us. But we navigate it together, and that makes all the difference. Dr. Chen, one of Jake's students, waves me over. "Can you explain why the ice melts faster where the skate touches?" I launch into an explanation about pressure and phase changes, and across the rink, Jake catches my eye and grins. That same smile that caught me off guard freshman year in our cramped dorm room, the same smile I get to wake up to every morning now. After practice, we walk home hand in hand through the city we've built a life in. Jake tells me about his day, about the student who's finally getting the hang of backward skating, about the team's chances in their upcoming tournament. I tell him about my patient rounds, about the differential diagnosis that had everyone stumped, about my advisor praising my research. It's ordinary and domestic and perfect. "Remember when you were terrified to even talk to me?" Jake teases. "Remember when you thought you were straight?" He laughs. Clearly I was very confused about many things. "You figured it out though." "We figured it out," he corrects, pulling me closer, together. And that's the truth of it. The door that Jake locked that rainy night freshman year didn't just open onto a romance. It opened onto partnership, growth, courage, and becoming the people we were always meant to be. Together.